So I heard about this high school sprinter. His name is Marcus. And he had all like the essential tools. Of course, being a sprinter, he was fast, but he had the speed to be able to do so. He had the actual start to be able to perform well. And so he was someone that his coach really believed in and really invested in him. But for some reason, whenever Marcus would get to the starting line, he would start to look at the other athletes that were around him. He would look at the guy who, finished really well, running races last year. He would look at the person on the other side of him with his brand new running cleats. So he would look at all of the things that are around him, and he would begin to, in his mind, think about why he would not be able to win the race. And so the result of that would be that many times we finished third, fourth, or even fifth in races that he possibly should have won, all because of what was happening in his mind. And so his coach really approached him, and his coach said to him, he said, look, you are your own greatest enemy. You have the skills. I've seen it, and I will continue to invest in you, but you cannot get yourself psyched out when you go to the starting line. Just focus on the finish and focus on what's behind you. So following that advice, he started to do better. He started to win some races. And as a result of that, he was actually able to qualify to make it to state finals. So he's really excited about that. So he gets to state finals. He runs his first 2 qualifying races, does really well in those. Matter of fact, he qualifies to even run in the final. But he gets to the starting line for the final, and all of a sudden, like the old Marcus kicks in, and he starts looking at the guys around him, and that's the guy that won state last year, and that's the guy that really ran really well in his qualifiers. He started looking around, and he was so focused on what was happening that he was actually late getting started because the start ran out. And so he starts to run, and he runs his heart out. And as a matter of fact, he runs so well that he's actually able to start to catch up with the group and ends up coming in third. And so, everyone's excited about him, the bronze, but he gets home and he's devastated. He's devastated by it because he knows he could have done better. He knows. And he sees his coach the next day, and he apologizes to his coach and says, I'm just so sorry I let it get in my head again. And his coach, being really encouraging, said, you know what, no worries. We'll work on it this summer, and you got next year. I don't know how many of you have watched the movie Creed. If you're not familiar with the movie Creed, how many of you have watched the Rocky movies? You've watched the Rocky movies? I remember in the first 2 Rocky movies, his opponent, what was his opponent's name? You can remember that? Apollo Creed. So the Creed series is actually his son. So his son wants to become a boxer as well. And eventually he's able to connect with Rocky, and so he asks Rocky to be his coach. And so there's one point in the movie where Rocky has Creed, he calls him over, and he has Creed take up his boxing stance, and he has him look into the mirror. And here's what Rocky says. You can see this right on the screen as well. He says to him, you see this guy here? That's the toughest opponent that you're ever going to have to face. I believe that's true in the ring, and I believe that that's true in life, or I think that's true in life, which is a great line. And then one of the things he has Apollo Creed, Adonis, do is he says, look, I want you to throw a punch. And so he throws a punch, and he gives him like a series of punches he wants him to throw. And he says, whenever you throw a punch based upon the mirror, I want you to do one of 3 things. I either want you to dodge it, I want you to counter punch, or I want you to kind of slip. So he gives him like this thing, and so you see Adonis doing that thing, and then what's really cool is Rocky says, I'll leave you 2 at it, then kind of walks away, kind of thing. But I think that message is really true, that sometimes the greatest opponent to us being able to move forward is ourselves, that we really do get in our way. And sometimes what we need to do is we need to learn how to dodge our own punches, our own jabs. We need to learn how to counterpunch the things we throw. We need to learn how to slip ourselves out of our own way. But it really is a challenge that I think that many of us face. And so we're doing this series called Dialed In. And in this series, what we've been looking at is how do we overcome the distractions that tend to hinder us from being able to pursue who God has called us to pursue, or to become the person that God has called us to become. And here's the reality. In this series, I think what we've done so far is we've hit like a lot of the external distractions that hinder us. But really, here's the truth, and I really want you to understand this. the external distractions have no power unless it is fed by our internal distractions. You know, we talk about a spiritual enemy, right? Satan. You know, we talk about, I don't know what that came from. I apologize. But we talk about this spiritual enemy that we fight, Satan. And a lot of times what we have a tendency to do is I think we give him greater power and greater ability to influence us and impact us than what we think he has. Because here's the truth. Satan has no more power in your life than what you allow him to have. He has no more influence, no more temptation in your life than what it is that you desire or that you allow him to be able to have in your life. So many times what you can do is if you're able to step out of your own way, then that will hinder Satan's ability to take you down the path he desires to take you down. So again, the greatest enemy that you have to face is not Satan. The greatest enemy that we have to face is the one that we stand and we look at in the mirror every day. But here's the beauty of that. This is important because here at Encounter, we talk about grace a lot. We talk about the work of God a lot. So the beauty of this is that God has already empowered us to be able to overcome ourselves and get out of our own way. That victory has already been won. That victory has already been determined. So all we have to do now is to begin to look at God. How do I align my life so that as a result of that, I can pursue what it is that you desire for me to pursue? Which brings us to our main thought for today, and I'm going to say it a lot, but I really want us to make sure that we understand it. But it's simply this. The right start begins with the right heart. The right start begins with the right heart. So here's what I want to do is I want to look at what are some of the internal distractions that get in our way that hinders us from being able to make great starts in our lives for moving forward. Because when I look at this room, and I'm sure for those of you that are watching on the live stream as well or watching the live stream replay, I believe that for many of us, there are certain inspirations that we have. Maybe the inspiration is for us to begin to overcome certain habits in our lives. Maybe the inspiration is for us to reevaluate our career and maybe move in a new direction or maybe even change some things in our lives. Maybe the inspiration for us is that we look at the current state of the relationship that we have with our wife or with our husband and begin to realize, like, I really want to change or improve things. Maybe we look at ourselves and there is a desire maybe to become better physically, maybe to become better emotionally, maybe to become better mentally. Like we look at our lives and there's this aspect of that we look at ourselves and there's this belief like, man, I really can grow. And so you come on Sundays and you're encouraged in that. Like God is working and God is moving. But again, the question becomes, well, how do we get out of our own way? How do we make sure that our internal motivation doesn't yield to external distractions that hinder us from being able to step into what we can be and who we could be? So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at a guy named Gideon. And what's really great about Gideon is if there is some aspects in your life that you think, wow, this is a great place for me to start, or these are the things that are hindering me from being able to start, Gideon's a great example for us to look at. Here are some things that can fall into place that will help us to be able to start this race and start this race well. So we're going to spend some time looking at him. But before we get to Gideon, I want to kind of give you a background and a backstory of what leads us to this moment so that you can understand why Gideon is doing what he's doing and that you can understand why God has actually chosen Gideon. So Israel has had this history. It probably is the same kind of history that we've had in our lives as well. Is that we decide, God, I'm going to pursue you, I'm going to obey you, God, I'm excited about you, and then we get moving, and that's what Israel would do. They would get moving, and then all of a sudden, they would get distracted by life, by the people around them, by the tribes around them, and start doing what the other tribes around them were doing. And as a result, Israel would then begin to go off this path, and this path would basically say to God, I don't need you. I can do it on my own. I got this. And God would say, because God's a gentleman. It's important for you to understand this. God is a gentleman. And as a gentleman, he's not going to force his way in your life. He's not. He's a gentleman. And so if you say to God, God, I don't want you, then God would go, okay. However, the beauty of it, though, is God will also say this, but if you change your mind, I'm here when you come back. I'm always here. So what would happen is Israel would go down this path, and God would say, all right, I'll let you do what you want to do. And then as a result of that, it will open them up to these all kind of vulnerabilities, and eventually these vulnerabilities would result into nations coming in and invading Israel. And then they would put Israel in this place where they were oppressed, they were overwhelmed, they would be like, God, we don't like this, God, we're sorry. And then what God would do is God would raise up these people called judges. And it's not like judges today. It's not like Judge Judy. You know, he wouldn't raise up, although Judge Judy probably could make a really great warrior. You know, she probably could. But what he would do is he would raise up these judges, and they would be warriors or leaders, but what would happen is they would come in, and then they would lead Israel to be able to overcome their enemy. And so the current enemy is a group called the Midianites. And what would happen with the Midianites is they were kind of a nomadic tribe. And the way that they would survive is they didn't have their own agricultural environment. Like Israel was a very agriculturally driven culture, society. And so they really depended upon being able to grow the grains and everything else. And as a result, that was essential to their success. So what the Midianites would do is they would, with other nations, but as well as with Israel, is they would wait till it's the time of the harvest. And as soon as it was, they would come in, they would invade the land, they would take their harvest, they would take their herds, and then they would kind of recess and leave. And so this happened to Israel 7 years straight. And as a result of this, they were struggling financially. Because, I mean, could you imagine, like, you invest, you build, and all of a sudden someone comes in, takes everything that you have, and then they kind of hang out, wait for you to build it again, then they take that. So that was kind of the pattern that was happening with the Midianites. And then the people of Israel, they finally began to complain. So God decides to raise the latest judge. And this judge is this guy named Gideon. So when the Midianites would come, what the Israelites would do is once they knew they were coming, they would either run to the cliffs, they would run to places, they would run to caves, they would find places to hide. If they had agriculture, they would try to find things to hide their agriculture so they would be able to survive. So that kind of gives you a picture of what's going on. So then what happens in Judges chapter 6, verses 11 and 12, it says this, Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree at Ophrah. I have to practice that a lot, Ophrah, because I kept saying what? Thank you. So I kept saying Oprah when I practiced. So Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Abiezar. Gideon, son of Joash, was threshing wheat at the bottom of a wine press. Now think about that. He's threshing wheat at the bottom of a wine press. Does anybody know what the problem is there? What do you usually put in a wine press? Grapes. So this was one of the ways that he was trying to hide his grain so the Midianites wouldn't come and take it. So he's putting it in the wine press. So he's threshing it into the wine press to hide the grain from the Midianites. And look at this. The angel of the Lord appears to him and said, Mighty hero. Now think about this. Mighty hero. Now what is he doing at this point? He's threshing grain into a wine press. This is not the act of a mighty hero. But mighty hero, the Lord is with you, is what it says. The Lord is with you. So this kind of gives us a really great... So what does the angel call Gideon? Mighty hero. And what we will see, the difference between Gideon and God is sometimes the same difference between us and God. That there's a way that God views you. And then what you do is you say, who, me? Like, mighty warrior, do you see what it is that I'm doing? Like, I'm the last person that you would choose. But again, remember we said the right heart, or the right start begins with the what? Right, the right start begins with the right heart. So He goes on and it says in Judges chapter 6, verse 13, Sir, because at this point, Gideon doesn't realize he's talking to an angel. Sir, Gideon replied, if the Lord is with us, and this brings us to our first distraction, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites. So this is what Gideon declares. But here's the reality, is the reason why Israel found themselves in this position, and I'm not saying that this is Gideon's situation at all, because it doesn't really go that far into his backstory. It just says that this is the person that God chose. But at this point, Israel is in this place because they completely rejected God, didn't want anything to do with God. They decided to go their own way. And here's the tendency, and this is the first distraction is what I would call the moral distraction. And sometimes the moral distraction hinders us. It's an internal distraction that hinders us from being able to start. And here's what the moral distraction is. And you've probably seen this. The moral distraction is I do something, I mess up my life, and then I blame everybody else. That's the moral distraction. So because of the moral distraction, what it does is it hinders me from being able to face me so that I can begin to allow God to heal and work in me. I can come before God, ask him for forgiveness, restoration, renewal, have restarted my life with him. So that's what happens with the moral distraction, is I refuse to take responsibility or accountability for what it is that I do. There's a story that's come out recently, and as soon as I say these three words, you might know exactly who I'm talking about. It's been it was on social media for a while. It's kind of died down now. But it is Kansas City Karen. Have you guys heard about that? Kansas City Karen. Have you guys heard about that? So here's what happens. The Israelites, sorry. Wrong tribe. The Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs. They go to the Meadowlands and they play against the Giants in the game. At the end of the game, Patrick Mahomes is walking off the field. He sees this kid. So he takes off his headband and he hands it to the kid. Right as he's handing it to a kid, you see this woman's hand come and snatch the headband. And you hear the kid say, "She stole my headband." You hear the kid say that. And then, of course, she goes on and that kind of thing. But what Kansas City Karen doesn't realize is this has been caught on film. And what happens with social media? Yes. So it made it to social media. It became a viral thing. And at first, her initial response was the same thing that we respond sometimes when we get caught. Oh, I wasn't stealing it. I thought that Patrick Mahomes was just handing it out. So I just reached for it, kind of thing. So she completely justifies what it is that she does. And you know how social media is. If you don't accept responsibility for what it is that you do, what does social media do? It comes down harder, right? It comes after you. And so eventually, here's what's really funny. Eventually, the boy's father comes out and says, "Okay, guys, we need to stop the death threats against her. Like, it's too much, kind of thing." And here's one of the things. I looked, and she did eventually apologize. But I think she apologized more because of social pressure, not necessarily because of what it is that she had done. But she does eventually apologize. I looked, and I could not find any story where she actually gave the headband back at this point yet. But here's kind of the cool thing. The Kansas City Chiefs heard about what was happening. So one day, there's a box that arrives on this boy's doorstep. He opens the box, and in it is an autographed headband by Patrick Mahomes. There's also an autographed jersey by Patrick Mahomes. They also give him like a Kansas City cup and, Chiefs cup and some other things as well. So it kind of makes up for it. But I'm just saying that story because I think Kansas City Karen is kind of indicative of a lot of us. That what we do is rather than admit responsibility, we blame. And we kind of try to bounce. We try to avoid responsibility. And maybe even worse, maybe we can be like Israel. And rather than look at ourselves, because I've also seen people do this, they create a mess in their lives, and then they blame God for the mess. God, I thought you loved me. God, I thought you cared. God, I thought you'd watch over me. God, I thought you would protect me. Meanwhile, I made my mess. But rather than taking my responsibility, I blame God for what it is that are the consequences of what I have created. That's the moral distraction. And until we're willing to face our responsibility for the choices that we've made and allow ourselves to hold ourselves accountable, and maybe someone else hold us accountable, and then we come before God to seek restoration and renewal and healing in our lives, then as long as the moral distraction has a greater voice in our lives, that's going to hinder our ability to be able to start well. So that's the first one, the moral distraction. Then, as it goes on, sorry, my page turned. And then as it, sorry. Oh, that's great. My app is uploading right now. It's like installing an update. Like, really? Out of all the times you're going to install an update? Hold on. This is crazy. I've never had this happen to me before. Out of all the times you're going to install the update for the documents I use right now. Oh, my goodness. That is bonkers. I've never seen anything like that. So it goes on. Thank you, Jesus. Thanks, God. It was a short update. But it goes on. And so as we look at the angel and what the angel does, and we look at this challenge, now we're looking at this conversation. And so Gideon has to come to some place in the realization in himself because, again, the right start begins with the what? The right heart. So it goes on in Judges chapter 6, verse 15, and it says, but Lord, Gideon replied, how can I rescue Israel? Because remember, what does God call him? Mighty hero, right? Mighty hero, mighty warrior, depending on the translation of the Bible that you use. But it says, but Lord, how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family. So literally what Gideon is saying is, look, my tribe is the least tribe. My people, my family is the least. He goes and basically just works his way down to, I am the last person, God, that you would use. Like, is there somebody else who's better qualified? Like, why would you choose me? And so that becomes the next distraction that I would call. I would say I would call that the belief distraction. And the belief distraction really boils down to, do I buy in to the messages that have been told to me about me? Do I buy into the messages maybe from society, maybe from school, maybe from other students, maybe from a teacher, sometimes maybe even from my own parents and family? Do I buy into the message? And the message is simply this: I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not, whatever your enough is, there's the I'm not enough. And so God says, look, I see you, and I see what I have placed into you, and I have plans to use your life to really make it, but who? Me? Like, me? Of all people, God, I'm the one that you would use and that you would choose to be able to make a difference. So it's important for us to make a commitment to really begin to explore, what does the Bible say about us? You know, this series is based upon a book called Undistracted by a guy named Bob Goff. And here's one of the things he says in this book. You can see it right on the screen. I love this. He says, the work you do is not a way to prove your worth. It is proof that God already sees you as worthwhile. Let me read that again, because that's really powerful. The work you do is not a way to prove your worth. It is proof that God already sees you as worthwhile. So here's the thing. For many of us, what we do is we make starts. And our goal in making the starts, we need to prove something about ourselves. We need to prove something. I will show you, right? And then we get started in that kind of thing. And then also what happens then is our identity becomes wrapped in to what it is that we start. And so once it becomes wrapped into what it is that we start, then we think, if it's successful, then what? I am successful. But then here's the problem then. What happens if it fails? then I'm a failure. I'm a struggler. I'm a wrestler. And I tell you, like, this was an issue for me for a while. You know, I hear about these guys that just pray, and they go before God, and they open up the doors of their church, and like 900 people are lining up outside to walk into the doors of their church. I'm like, bruh, really? Because that's not my story. But I would look at their story and think, oh, man. I look at these guys, they post on social media, and they're getting like 17,000 likes and 400,000 views and that kind of thing. And I'm looking at like 2 likes and 38 views. You know, so I recognize this. And there was a wrestle that I had for a long time. And it's something I'm still constantly working on trying to pull myself out of, this feeling that I'm not enough. But as we look at this, it's important. Because if you start something with the mentality, whether you believe it or not, if you start something with the mentality that I'm trying to prove something, then inwardly what you're really saying is, I'm not enough. So this is proof to me that I am. But the problem is, if it doesn't work, then what happens to my enough then? Because now I add a new enough, doesn't it? I'm not business savvy enough. We can begin to add some things to that. So this is important. When we start well, it's important for us to understand I am forgiven, I am accepted, I am chosen, I am loved, I am valued. Jesus went to the cross because he saw me worth dying for. So I don't start from a position of having to prove myself because God has already proven it for me. So if I start well, and I push hard. And if it succeeds, great. If it doesn't succeed, great. I still am who God has called me to be, who he determines me to be. So the belief distraction is important for us to look at as well. So Gideon, as he's having this conversation, he begins to realize, like, am I really the guy? So I need to test this. So what Gideon does is he's like, hold on. So he runs home, and for some reason he makes a young goat. He cooks some goat meat and a broth, and he brings it back out. Realize again at this point he still doesn't realize he's talking to an angel. So he brings it back, and then the angel says like, hey, set it on that rock. And so Gideon sets it on the rock, and then the angel takes his spear. He touches a rock, and whoosh, the rock lights up, and it's consumed. And all of a sudden, Gideon's like, oh, Jesus. Oh, my Lord. Like, because realize the belief back at that time was that God is holy. And it still is this time. God is holy. God is pure. To look upon God for us right now, as a practical example, to look upon God would be like looking at the sun. Like, what happens if we look at the sun too long? We go blind. I had an eye appointment recently, and my optometrist says, you're starting to develop cataracts. And I was like, I don't have a cataract. I have a Kia. No, just really, really bad joke. All right. But the doctor says, and I said, well, is there anything that I could prevent? She says, well, you probably should try to wear sunglasses or that kind of thing more because cataract really is a result of sun damage to your eyes. That's what it's really from. So this is the idea that God is so holy, he's kind of like the sun. But back then, here's what the thought is, I'm not going to go blind, I'm going to die. That was the mindset back then. So when Gideon sees his angel, he's like, huh, I'm going to die. That's his thought. But remember, the right start begins with what? The right heart. So it goes on and it says in Judges chapter 6, verses 23 through 24. I love this. So Gideon thinks, I'm going to die, right? This is what the Lord says. It's all right, the Lord replied. Do not be afraid. You will not die. And Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and named it Yahweh Shalom, which means the Lord is peace. The altar remains in Ophrah in the land of the clan of Abiezar to this day. Yahweh Shalom. The Lord is peace. Now, I really want you to understand what peace means, because a lot of times, and you guys maybe heard me say this before, and you'll probably hear me say this again in the future, but it's important for us to understand this, because typically when we think about peace, we think about the absence of conflict. Whether it's peace in, the Middle East, or whether it's peace in my relationship with my family, or peace in my relationship with my friends, or peace at work, it means that I have the absence of conflict. And sometimes the absence of conflict may not necessarily be I'm in conflict with another person. Maybe sometimes the absence of conflict may be I don't have bills hanging over my head. This project at work is done. I'm on top of. I'm doing well. So that could be an aspect of peace as well. But the biblical definition of shalom is so much deeper and richer than that. So the idea of shalom is completeness, wholeness, fullness. That's the idea of what shalom is. And that is what God offers to us in our relationship with him. So when it says Yahweh Shalom, then the reality is what this is saying is I'm at peace with God. And here's important for us to understand that God really is the source of our peace. He's the source of our peace. If we try to find peace, completeness, wholeness, and fulfillment, that's great English there. I is a college student. No, but if we try to find wholeness in those ways, the reality is society and life doesn't match up. And it never will. So this next distraction is what I would call a focused distraction. What am I focusing on? What is it that I'm pursuing? What is it that I'm going after? Because if I'm going to start right, then I have to make sure I'm going after the right thing, correct? If I'm not going after the right thing, no matter how well I start, no matter how disciplined I am, no matter how committed I am, if I'm still going after the right thing, I'm still going to end up in the wrong place. Unsatisfied, unfulfilled, still looking. So this is one of the things that's really important for us to recognize in this. Do we have a focused distraction as well? Now, things begin to progress, and I don't have time to go into all of Gideon's story. I would encourage you, if you want to read the story of Gideon, start with Judges chapter 6, read all the way through Judges chapter 8. It's a really, really great story, really great story. But there's this one point where Gideon has got together his army, but he's still like, I don't know if I'm the guy, I don't know. And so he kind of goes on a mission. He takes another guy with him. And on this mission, what he does is he sneaks to the Midianite camp. He doesn't actually go into the camp. He just sneaks right to the edge. And once he gets there, God gives him the privilege of overhearing a conversation. And here's the conversation that he hears. Because again, remember, the right start begins with what? The right heart. So Judges chapter 7, verses 13 through 14, it says, Gideon crept up just as a man was telling his companion about a dream. The man said, I had this dream, and in my dream a loaf of barley bread came tumbling down into the Midianite camp. It hit a tent, turned it over, and knocked it flat. His companion answered, your dream can only mean one thing. God has given Gideon, this no-name, unknown, last person, God has given Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite, victory over Midian and its allies. So he hears his name. He hears his name. And so now he's ready to go and to fight. And here's the last distraction I want to spend some time looking at. And it's simply this, that for many of us, Gideon had this privilege. The privilege is he was kind of afraid about starting, but then he goes, he hears this encouragement, and he moves forward. Sometimes we don't get that encouragement. And here's the thing is, Sometimes here's what we'll do is we'll say, I want to start, but A, B, C, D, E, F, and lowercase j. Like all of these elements have to be in place, and then I'll start. I'll get all of my ducks in a row, right? Yeah, let me get everything lined up, and then I will start. And here's what we do, though, is we get everything lined up, and then what do? Oh, I need to get some more lined up. Right? We wait for the perfect conditions in order for us to start. It says this in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 4. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. So if you wait for perfect conditions, you will never start. So this is what I would call the procrastination distraction. We hold off. We wait. I wonder, how many books in this room have not been written? How many lives in this room have not had the opportunity to touch other lives the way that we could have? How many businesses have not been started? How many encouragements have not been handed out? How many? And I want to make this really clear. This is not about guilt. Because here at Encounter, we don't operate on a position of guilt. So I want to make that really clear. This is not about guilt. You know what this is about, though? Is, okay, God, if you believe it, I'll do it. If you think it's in me, I'll go. And I'll tell you, for me, I'll be honest with you. Okay, about 6 months ago, I was on this walk. And as I'm walking, I'm listening to this podcast. And in this podcast, one of the things they started talking about is how many Christians that are in their 20s and 30s that are walking away from God and who he is. So I'm listening to this. And then as I'm listening to it, I'm starting to think about my own journey where I feel like God has been taking me in my relationship with him. And so as I'm walking, I feel like, I think I need to start a podcast. Just to be able to encourage those who feel disenchanted with Christianity, that maybe I can build a podcast to encourage them. And so I started doing research, and I've actually created a podcast studio. You know, Maddie helps to, count money out this. She's actually sat in my studio. But I've created like a podcast studio, and Carrie's sitting in as well. I've created a podcast studio. You can see it when I do the announcements. That's behind me. That's part of the podcast studio that I'm creating. So I got it all done. I'm ready to go. And then all of a sudden, I started thinking about all the other ducks in a row that I needed to do. So I'm also saying this. Within 2 weeks, I'm launching a podcast. I'm going to do it. And we'll just see what God does. And it's going to be a video podcast, so you'll be able to watch it on YouTube or on our website. And it will also be an audio podcast. So if you're driving down the street and you want to listen to it on Spotify or wherever it might be, Apple Music, Apple Podcast, and we're going to make it available that way as well. But we're going to launch it and we're going to go for it. Because I feel like, how can I challenge you if I'm not going to challenge myself? But here's the thing that there's also another decision that I've made. Because I've determined I will not connect my identity on likes, views, and follows. I'm not. So also here's something that I've decided as well. Recently, being honest with you guys, I have been busy. And unfortunately, what I've done is I've allowed my busyness to interfere with the time that I spend with God. So I think as a result of that, my mentality allowed fear to get in the way that I think hindered me from being able to start the podcast and being able to accomplish and do other things as well. So what I've decided is not only am I starting a podcast, but I'm also following through on things that I feel like God's been inspiring me to do. Ken, I want to spend time with you. I want to hang out with you. So I think it's important for us to realize, like, if we're going to start, and if we're going to start well, make sure that you start. Like, God, I just want to hang out with you. And again, it's not motivated out of guilt. I'm just recognizing that my soul is thirsty. And God is the only drink of water that will ever satisfy it or fulfill it. So I want to encourage you to make a commitment to do the same thing as well. And the great thing is, in the back, I put tools that are on the table. Take them. You can use them for prayer. You can use them for being able to connect with God. You can use them for being able to examine your life, discovering vision for your life. There are tools that are back there. Please take them. Utilize them. Sit down with a pen and paper, start processing and walking through it. They're there. They're for you. That's what I've created them for. But I want to encourage us with that. So, again, what internal distraction? Moral distraction, belief distraction, focus distraction, or procrastination distraction? What is it that's hindering us from really being able to start well? Let's figure that out and then begin to pursue God and who he is. Which brings us to here at Encounter. One of the things that we want to encourage you to do is we want to look at loving God, loving others, and loving ourselves. Here at Encounter, we say love up, love out, love in. And what we do is at the end of every message, we look at how we can take that and apply that to our lives based upon the message. So in loving up, here's what I want to encourage you. Remember that God is with you, and let his word define you. Not anyone else, not even yourself. Let God define you. Let his truth about you, let his love about you, let that define you. Love out. Inspire others to start. Inspire others. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. If you decide to start something, find somebody else that's going to start something as well. And then here's what you do is come together, encourage each other, love each other, support each other. And then also use it like, hey, are you hitting some challenges? And talk about those challenges. But use it as a way, and then pray for each other. Use it as a way to kind of inspire each other as you make your new start. And then love in. One word. Start. Start. Get rid of the excuses. Just start. Father, I thank you